I cover primarily politics, and then Dope Boys we do that's culture, business, but it still is in an orbit of generally a certain political perspective. But when you're in conversations like in sports media, but I know True Hoop, you guys touch on everything.
Right.
You're and what I guess I'm wondering is like the attitude that is exemplified in the quote in the mainstream media, the corporate media, all the things that we always have been talking about, like the false equivalencies.
Right.
Obama, and you remember how it was during Obama, like, well, yeah, the Republicans blocked all of his court nominees and said that he was a member of the Nation of Islam. But, Obama was kind of rude to Eric Cantor once. So I think we all know that that's, both sides need to be more bipartisan, all that
Right.
nonsense,
Yeah.
which is like we're constantly criticizing. But I felt like before Trump, there was still more currency, like in people who kind of covered sports more casually, like if it wasn't their kind of main thing, or even like in culture of wanting to give deference to that kind of false equivalency. And I'm wondering if you think like in sports world or in the broader world for people who are touching on politics, do you think that like that's starting to crack with just the overwhelming weight of like wouldn't give a Supreme Court justice hearings, nominated the grab by the P dude, nominate the aren't we on the first half? I actually never know when I could technically swear. The was he not a swear?
Man,
I
if
feel like we're in a
everybody
George Carlin bit right
on
now.
every mainstream media,
Yeah, you gotta
we
say
can
it.
all say it now.
That's true.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, I say it. I just
Well, yeah.
it's context dependent. But the I mean, believe me. No, but look,
I've said that word.
but I'm just saying. No, but I'm just saying, like, yeah. Poor Matt.
Right.
We always get. But look, but I guess what I'm saying. So, do you think that that's cracking through it all? Like people are
think it
starting
is.
to
I
finally
think
confront some of the reality of where
in
we're at.
in the political media, the mainstream political media, I should say, because a lot,
Yeah.
I hate to get into it all technical, but people just throw around the word media
Yeah.
as this blanket one size fits all when it's not.
And
but
it's
like
very much not.
the mainstream corporate media, I think they've been rocked so thoroughly
Right.
by like you see all of these little pretenses that you guys hold so dearly. The core audience just doesn't care. At all. And so I think that's what you see Cuomo addressing right there. He's like, look, man, we did that. We tried that, and it's bullshit. Nobody actually cares about
Right,
that.
right.
In sports media, you still have that because I think the main audience does want this kind of more broader talk in their sports.
Right.
Because it's not for a lot of people, it's not as personal.
Right.
Unless it's like college football and
that
and that's
matters.
Southerners, so you know what that is.
Yeah.
But for the
Wait
most
a
part,
second. If we reinstitute chain gangs, will that hurt Miss You in the Orange Bowl? Hold on one moment.
it's so much more personal for it's personalizing sports. It's less mainstream than personalizing politics.
So how does that play though when someone like, because I thought of you. We were on break, and I know like we texted about it, but we didn't really get to go over it. But like who we mentioned before, Coach Popovich, who for people don't know is the coach of the Cleveland San Antonio Spurs. I don't know why I had that dyslexic thing for a second. That's a very good team, very respected team, and he's not only political in the sense that after Trump won, pretty much all the other major coaches were like, we're in training. Popovich was like, no, I think that this is not a good thing for the country. I think that, and then over the break, he did a forum with Dave Zirin, who a lot of people will know is a radical sports writer, and Cornel West with a group of basically local young people in San Antonio area, So like, how's that? And that kind of makes me like, in some ways, it reminds me more of like, in the 70s, like we think of like obviously Muhammad Ali, but even dudes like, Bill Bradley was a pretty outspoken person when he was in Nick. So to me, it's almost like, are we getting retro on that? Is that coming back a little bit, or is that still a real outlier?
Popovich is an outlier in the sense of in the political culture. there's no equivalent to 5 championship rings, right? Like it's hard to get that entrenched in what you do and who you are in the way that Popovich is. So it's like, yeah, Popovich, like even, Phil Jackson was considered some, hippie, crazy person from Montana. But at the end of the day,
North
it's hard.
Dakota. Williston,
Oh, excuse me. But he lives in Montana now. Okay, sorry. My bad. My bad, man. I know that's your area of expertise. You see, this is what I mean about nerdery. Like, you don't want to jump out on a limb on something so that somebody can be like, well, actually,
that was Matt definitely went full. Well, actually,
yeah, his antenna went.
That
Whoa,
was real.
hold up, hold up now.
I don't have much we're proud of, but
yeah, it's hard. It's hard to
Jackson.
entrench yourself in that way, in the way that Popovich has. He's like his resume is so unimpeachable.
Right.
He cannot be fired. And by the way, he's employed. The person who signs his check, a guy named Peter Holt. If for those of you who aren't familiar, you can Google him. Yeah. There's no way in hell he voted for Hillary Clinton.
Right.
Not a chance.
Right.
In fact, he probably gave money to Donald Trump in his cause.
Right.
And that's the guy who signs Popovich's checks.
Right.
But Popovich is so empowered in who he is in his profession and in that culture and community. He can speak freely in a way that, say, Peter Jennings just can't.
Right.
You know what I'm saying? Like Peter Jennings, there is no 5-ring equivalence for Peter Jennings. He's not respected in that way.
But what about on the player level? Because it's just like occurring to me too that like we're just in such a because Michael Jordan obviously was the dude that like made the fetish of like. I think not. I mean, I think
staying above the fray.
Yeah, and I think it was like a marketing decision, and it was also seemed like it reflected like who he is as a dude. You know, like he's pretty self-oriented.
Sure.
But now to me, it's like LeBron has done some things. Like I'm not going to stay in a Trump hotel,
right?
And I respect that, and I'm glad he's doing it. But it also seems to me that in today's environment, like if you're LeBron, how could you not do that?
Right.
Like who is going to be okay with their favorite player being like, you know what I mean? Like if you're like, it certainly would affect my perception of you as a player if you were cool with Trump.
I think the problem
like is that a different pressure is what I'm saying, coming from the opposite ends.
It's 2 tracks for me. It's two. One is
by the way, he says tracks too.
Well, I probably stole
points.
that from you.
Yeah.
If we're being honest.
That's
a good.
That's a thing. Everybody.
Tracks are a thing.
People say that.
Okay.
I mean, it's true.
So so
there's 2 tracks.
For a guy like LeBron, I think the problem with this thing is so new.
Yeah.
This idea that athletes would politicize themselves like willingly, and I don't think anybody's really got a handle of where the line is, how far they can push the envelope. Because if you see somebody like LeBron James, who is, if not the most powerful singular person in sports, he's in the top 3.
Definitely.
Right? So you or I would think, what's stopping LeBron? Who or what could stop LeBron James? But I don't think he's actually been able to sort of get a grasp of where that line is. Mm-hmm. Somebody like you or I or even Matt would say there is no line when you're already a $1 billion entity and you will continue to do so pretty much no matter what. I think because it's such a new thing that these guys are, learning that. And I think another part of the problem is like, even if you love Kobe Bryant, even if you love LeBron, you love Michael Jordan, what I find with athletes is that fans just have a hard time humanizing these dudes. It's just like they just have a hard time seeing them as fully formed people. It's like outside of their job function, keep the Trump and Hillary stuff out of this. I
just
wanna
don't
watch
wear
you shoot
baggy
jumpers.
trousers at the club.
Yeah.
And perform well on the field.
I think fans have a hard time internalizing the humanity of these dudes, and I hate how, fake deep that sounds, but that's what it is. Yeah. I'm hanging out with a buddy the other day, and he told me if LeBron James wanted to, he could have been Tiger Woods if that's what he dedicated his life to. It's this idea that like this guy's
what does he mean by that?
Meaning like he's such a gifted person.
Right.
thing, whatever he put his mind to, he could have been the very best
he
at
could
it.
have been golf.
And I'm like, look,
You're saying, okay.
LeBron James is probably the best basketball player I've ever seen, but he's not God, right? Like, he can't just do anything. And I think, and to me, that just connects to this idea that you don't see this person as a human being. It's like, yeah, I'm good at this, but I'm not great at everything. I just think people just, for whatever reason with the athletes, they don't humanize them in that way. I don't know. And so when you this idea that LeBron could be deeply affected by this election, it's like, I don't care. You know, just dunk and make jump shots.
You sound like a conservative pundit now. We gotta get. Matt, you have a point. Then we can jump to the fun half.
Well, that sort of hero worship that people put into athletes, it makes me think like if they were born in like the 1890s or something, they would probably think of like Napoleon or like war leaders like that.
Yeah,
so it's almost a good outlet.
MacArthur.
That they think like, oh,
yeah, exactly. Exactly.
Hey, it's Sam Seder. Why don't you subscribe to this channel? You can do so right over here. Over. Subscribe.